This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guests are Dominique and Guillaume Lafon. We'll talk to Dominique and Guillaume about Burgundy, Domaine Lafon, Dominique Lafon, generational change, and more. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. There is no lack of superlatives to describe Dominique Lafon, the maestro, the master, the magician, and the mentor of Merlot. The Lafon family has been making wine in Burgundy for over 150 years. Dominique Lafon joined the family winery in the 80s and now oversees Domaine de Comte Lafon in Merlot, Les Héritiers du Comte Lafon in the Macon. He makes wine in Oregon with the Lingua Franca people and at his eponymous winery, Dominique Lafon in Beaune in Burgundy, with his son and winemaker Guillaume. The Lafons are producing some of the greatest white wines in the world and, of course, red too. So, welcome to the Grape Nation, Dominique and Guillaume.
Hello.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, Sam.
Great to have you guys. So we are talking to Dom and Guillaume remotely. We're all on our computers from Burgundy via our Zencaster app. I know Guillaume and Dominique, you are in different spaces. Where are you guys right now? Guillaume, where are you? And Dominique, where are you?
I'm currently in Paris, both for business matters and because my girlfriend lives here. So I'm on the table where I take breakfast.
Okay. And Dominic, where are you?
I'm in Beaune at my house, in my kind of small office. I have a tiny office in my house, but just because I used to have a big office when I was working full time at Comte Lafon, but now the business is quieter than it used to be.
Right. Now, your house is how far from the winery? Is it there or is it separate?
It takes me it's a bit more than a 5-minute drive to the Chateau de Bligny-les-Beaunes, where the Dominique Lafon wines are made, and let's say a bit more than 10 minutes to Merlot.
Okay, that sets us up. All right, so Dominique, before we get into everything, I want my listeners to sort of get some context about, who you guys are. So can you give us a brief history? And I use the word brief because certainly, we could spend a lot of time on it, but I'd like you to cover everything, but kind of buzz through it, of the family winery, and just discuss all the properties and also your path to running the family wineries. You wound up going to school for wine, you worked with Becky, all those things, just, cover that.
Okay.
And I want you to cover everything. You don't have to get into detail because really, I'm committed to talk to you and Guillaume about, the Dominique Lafon winery. So take it from there. I know you were born in Beaune, but grew up in Paris. So go ahead.
Well, I was born in Chalon-sur-Saône, which is next to Beaune. My first 7 years, my father was in Paris, and we moved to Burgundy when I was 7 years old. should I start by my great grandfather first, or do you want it short, kind of?
So well, because no, you could do that, but keep it in mind.
Okay. And actually, I grew up in Beaune on my childhood, and was around Beaune, and because my father was living in Beaune and was going to Meursault very often, and we used to play around in Meursault also, and I've been surrounded by all those things all my childhood. Even trying, when I was 15, trying to help in the cellar and doing things like this. If you take the story of the domain, it started with my great grandfather, who was from the southwest of France, Agen, and he married someone from Burgundy called Madame Bock, who had properties. And my great grandfather was a very wealthy lawyer and a collector of art. When he arrived in Burgundy, he kind of cleaned the domain, selling the less good appellations and buying, he bought more Meursault Charme, he bought the Montrachet, he bought many things, more Volnay-Centenot du Milieu also. And I think his idea, because you couldn't make any money at that time out of a vineyard, a domain. So it was a collection of great vineyards. He was a gastronome because he was part. I don't know if you know that he was part of the Club des 100. He was a member, and the Club des 100 is a gathering of people who love food and wine. And I think the house in Meursault was designed to do parties for the Club des 100.
Really?
And so he needed very good wines. So that I think that was the major idea behind that.
So wait, you think the club motivated him to concentrate on only better quality wines? Nothing wrong with that.
No, I haven't met him, so I'm not sure. But I heard he was, he didn't need the money from the vineyard, and that. Right. He was part of that club, which is still a very important club, where people do gathering and drink wine and eat very good food. And I think it was part of his motivation, not the only one, because it was a family business from his wife too. To go very brief, he had two sons, Pierre, my grandfather, and Henri, my great uncle, who happened to be the wrong age, around 20-ish, during the First World War. So they both went to First World War. I think after that, my grandfather, Pierre, was not involved with the domain. My uncle arrived at the domain when my great-grandfather died, but he was not very involved. And I think those two guys, they inherited from my great-grandfather, and they had a good life, but they didn't get that much involved with the estate, at the point that they were selling all the grapes to shippers at that time. And that story I know much better now, because it's from my father in 1950 something. The great uncle who had sold farms. We had farms, we had beautiful houses in Dijon, things like this. So everything was sold bit by bit to make money. When they arrived in Meursault, and he said to my father, "Well, now we're going to sell the domain." And my father said, "No way." And he had to fight his family to keep the domain. And this is how my father started in 1956. But he was an engineer. He lived in Paris, and good for the domain, because it was a good way to make money at that time, to be an engineer. So the money he was making as an engineer helped him to keep the domain running, or not running, but surviving.
Right.
And that's how it started in very, very, you have to remember, very difficult time for the wine and for Burgundy. You couldn't sell a white wine. It was not
It's so
possible.
Crazy to hear that now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have stories with the other colleagues at the age of my father. They were telling me that people would go shopping in Meursault and would trade food against a bottle of white wine because you couldn't sell it.
Wow.
It was worth nothing. The vineyard was worth nothing. And that's how he started. And actually, most of his life, my father, he started bottling wine because the negociants, the shippers, wouldn't buy the wines. So they had stocks. So that's when a lot of growers in Meursault started to bottle their wines. And they tried to find a market. And my father has worked a great deal on that matter.
So he helped to create the market by doing his own bottling and literally going out and selling.
Exactly. Right. And at that time, my father or my grandfather or great grandfather, they never worked a vineyard themselves. They had a sharecropping agreement.
Right. Explain what a sharecropping agreement is.
It's like a long-term lease where you hire someone to work the vineyard, and he leases the vineyard, and against his work, he gets half the crop. So the domain would get only half the crop.
So Dominique, in those days, were you able to dictate to those sharecroppers how they could farm, or they were doing whatever they wanted to do?
No, you couldn't say anything. Right. It was their job. And actually, even harvest dates, you couldn't define it. If to make it short, when I arrived at the domain, it was still working this way. One of the sharecroppers was Pierre Moret, who's a famous grower and winemaker in Meursault. So that was kind of good. But we had others running vineyards in Volnay and a little bit also a few vineyards in Meursault. Anyway, when I arrived, that's how it was. And the goal has been very quickly to break those agreements, which are 9 years contract. So in 1984, I started discussing with all those growers to break those contracts and to take over the vineyard, which was a major change for the domain because it's control of the vineyard, control of harvest dates, but also we double the production because we don't give the half the crop.
Right.
And so as it's 9 years agreement, I started taking over vineyards in 1987. And we finished taking everything back in 1993. So that was gradual.
Wow, long process.
And that's where we are. I forgot to tell you, I studied enology and viticulture school. I worked abroad for a little bit in California in 1981.
Where did you work in California?
Oh, nobody remembers that brand.
What was it?
I was working with Jim Olsen, who started J.W. Morris Portwork.
I don't know it.
Well, try to find it.
Yeah,
he was part of. And I arrived when he moved to making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It was a bit messy, but to me, it was fun. It was my first time in the US, and the first time working in a cellar abroad. So it was great. I was living in Berkeley. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and don't neglect to leave out. You worked with the legendary Becky Wasserman selling and buying wines.
Exactly. When I came back from the US early '82, I tried to work with my father, but he was not ready at all to change anything. So I decided to do something else. And that's when I went to visit Becky, who actually helped me to have this internship in the US. And I said, Becky, I have no work. I have no job. Could you offer me something? And Becky's an incredible person, because she gives confidence to young people. I was super young. I was 23 years old. And she said, I don't have much money, but you could do a part-time job with us. I said, fine, Becky. I started a part-time job. And I was still looking for a job in the winemaking, working anywhere, maybe being a winemaker for a big shipper, or I can't remember what was offered at the time. And so after like a month, I said, Becky, I have appointments because I've been offered a full-time job. And she looked at me and said, well, now you're full-time with me.
Oh, that's great.
And the company was small at that time. We were 3, so it was just starting at that time, or it started like 3 years ago. And Becky gave me, my job was to look for new wines. So I was running around Burgundy to find new producers, which I would take samples, and we would then taste, and Becky would say, okay, I like this one, or I don't like that one. So we would choose together what we would deal with. And also, I was at my age, I was doing 3 trips a year to the US to sell the wine and to promote the wine. And imagine when and back over 40 years ago, 45 years ago,
the interest in the wine is not the same, yeah.
And going around, I was doing New York, Washington, Florida. I went to Missouri. I went to Chicago. I went to Texas. I went to Atlanta. I was going to California. So I was going around the United States with all those wines to sell. And I still remember the first time I was so young and my English was not that good. I was in Chicago, and the guy got me in the room. And he said, okay, now there's 100 person in front of you. You have a microphone, talk about the wine. And I was dead. I was like, what am I going to be able to say?
Oh, no.
But I've learned so much.
It sounds like you got better at that.
Yeah, I worked on it. But thanks to Becky, because just doing business always in English in our office helped a great deal.
Sure.
So I worked 4 years with Becky, and I arrived end of 86 at the domain full time. Okay. We did a short time with my brother Bruno, who is Pierre Lafon's father, who now Pierre Lafon works at the domain with my daughter Léa. But he left in 89, so it was very short. And so we started running the vineyards and taking over more vineyards and growing the company. I think one of the major steps is that we moved organic and biodynamic super early in 1995. So I was not pioneer, but I was just right behind the pioneers.
Dominique, who was the influence? Like, who had your ear, or who was practicing it?
For biodynamic?
Yeah.
Well, I was unknown people, but maybe
Okay.
A guy like Jean-Claude Rateau in Beaune has been very influential. Didier Monchauvet. There are small growers, but then also I was very close to Anne-Claude Leflèvre, who started the first trials in 94, so a year before I started, and she showed me the trials, and I was very interested. This is really what got me into it. And that's about it. At that time, there was not that many people around us to talk about it.
We'll talk about how that type of farming, has such a positive effect. I want to get to Guillaume. And Dominic, through the show, we'll talk about, the other wineries too. But Guillaume, you and I talked, technically you are a 5th generation Lafon, which is impressive. When you go back to the beginnings that your dad talked about. I picked up somewhere that you've been called a poet and a philosopher. I guess that's an indication of your interest and your personality. That being said, why did you become a winemaker? Did your dad put you in a headlock and make you do it? Or was it something you thought about? Why did you become a winemaker? And tell me a little about your path to getting there.
Yeah, sure. I think I've been described as a poet and a philosopher, maybe because I did actually study philosophy and I wrote books.
Okay.
But now the person I quote the most is my dad, Dominique Lafon.
Okay.
I grew up from a family that's really, really integrated into the wine business in Burgundy, because on my mom's side, I'm from the Roumier family. I'm actually the grandson of Jean-Marie Roumier, who was also a great philosopher and inspired me somehow.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, as I grew up, I was not so interested into the wine and the winemaking. I think also the fact that my parents divorced when I was 9, I wouldn't see my father as much, and maybe didn't have that much time to transmit the passion, and that happened later.
Right.
I realized how lucky I was when I was probably more 20 and had the maturity and the age to drink and party around
Okay.
around great wines. I so I wanted to leave from Burgundy. That was my first objective as a teenager. um, I studied philosophy and sciences because I was always fond of science and literature. Um, I had an amazing time studying and like working also in my first jobs around edition in science, stuff like that. But even though I was thinking, okay, I have a double master, super nice high degree diploma, but it's hard to get a job with this kind of baggage. So since I was good with computer, I started working in coding and education technologies.
Wow.
That was 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Right. Where were you living then?
In Paris.
Okay.
In Paris, where I met my actual girlfriend, and where I have a lot of friends, with whom we gather in Burgundy most of the times. So I worked in educational technology. It was fun and interesting, but I think when I started really hardworking on computers and code is when my passion for ground, earth, and like real thing you can touch and smell and feel like grew heavier. I started drinking more wine, also visiting a lot more domains. I did few harvests during that time. I did actually an harvest with André Ostertag in Chile, which was very inspiring. Sure. And Arthur, his son, is a great friend. I did some harvest when I could at Dominique Lafon, also during those years. I also worked at Lingua Franca for the vinification in 2017, I think.
Early on.
And it was also an amazing time there. So I guess I have a family that transmitted me the passion for big dinners and wines. My dad, I think, transmitted me a lot of things, but also the passion and knowledge of how things grow, how the ground is made, and like all the secrets there is behind that. And then it's
your dad's a little obsessed with that stuff.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of people that I met that inspired me as well, more into the winemaking subjects.
So you kind of had a natural ramp up into your interest in wine, kind of on your own, drinking, interning, harvests, all of that, right? Spending time even doing harvests with the family. So tell me when, is it you that approaches your dad, or does he approach you and say, come on, what are we doing here? Let's do this together. When did this happen?
I approached, actually.
Okay.
I did actually a first approach in 2017 because I was in between two jobs and I was like, okay, it's time. I want to go. It was maybe a little too early for both of us.
Right.
And then the second approach was effective, and I think my dad was happy that I did approach him with that project.
Dominic, were you hoping for that? I mean, is that something in the back of your mind, you hope would play out?
Yeah, I would like to add something to
Please.
What Guillaume just said, which is a funny thing, which I always tell everybody. Those poor kids, Guillaume and Leah, they've been forced since they were super young for Christmas and Easter. They had to drink Montrachet and Musigny. Poor kids. So, which is something Guillaume never mentioned, but his passion for wine and his palate has always been incredible, amazing.
You broke him in early.
Yeah. But he has a real good ability to taste, and I think it's part of, because we've done all those lunches and dinner with the family with great wines, and that's a lot of learning.
Right.
Now, when Guillaume told me I want to join, I was more than happy. I was actually not exactly expecting it, because I thought he was going with his computer things and all that. And I'm 66 years old now, and I was like, oh, God, Comte Lafon, Héritier de Comte Lafon. Now I have Pierre and Léa who are running the business, and am I going to run that business until I'm 90 years old?
Right.
And so when Guillaume arrived, I didn't know what to do with that company. I said, what's going to happen in the future? And when Guillaume told me, I'd be really keen to work with you, I was so happy.
What year was that?
That was a bit more than 2 years ago.
Oh, because so it's still very.
Yeah,
I thought it was a little longer. Oh, so it's still.
It was a bit more than 2 years ago, because it was like at that season, and. Then he spent another 6 months in Paris, tried to find a school to study enology and viticulture, and then they spent a year in that school, and I hired him on the 21st of August this year. He's been full time at Dominique Lafon, so we've been working together for less than 6 months now.
Wow, that's interesting. So a lot to talk about. I want to talk to you before we get into, the winery and the winemaking and all that. I want to talk to you a little about Burgundy. Dom, you'd mentioned the 80s were an exciting time and a pivotal time in Burgundy. What was going on then that, made you feel that?
What was going on? I think there was a lot of very interesting person I was in contact with. We were the agent for Domaine de la Pousse-d'Or, Gérard Potel, who is one of my mentors. Okay. We used to work with Lafarge. We used to work with a lot of great people. I was friends with Henri Jaillet at that time, who really inspired me too. But globally, we had to struggle to sell wine, honestly.
As you mentioned.
I remember one vintage for Domaine de la Pousse-d'Or, who's like now all the Gérard Potel's wine are collector's wine. It's hard to find, and it's rare, and it's always beautiful wines. I remember being on the phone with a Californian importer, and I said, "Well, Dom, I'm not sure I'm going to buy this vintage." I was like, come on, you're the importer. You can't do that. Well, the market is difficult. I'm not sure about the vintage, which, when you tell that to a young grower nowadays, he doesn't believe you. It's not. Right. It looks like not possible. Henri Jaillet, who was a friend, was not a superstar. Yeah, we used to do lunches and dinner with him, and I was like, "Hey, Henri, your Cros Parentout, it's a beautiful wine. It's great." But it was just like normal. We had that like full buckets of it. It was not rare.
Right.
And so it was a hard time in a way, but it was very friendly. And I think my generation, and I include Christophe Roumier, so Guillaume Sancourt, Etienne Griveaux, Patrick Bispe, there was Jacques Ceste also. I'm going to forget some of them. Fred Lafarge, of course. Jean-Pierre Desmet. We started to collaborate very closely in terms of technique, sharing our feelings. There's Etienne Griveaux too. Sharing our feelings, tasting together, but also going abroad to do tasting, to show our wines together. I think, it's going to be the Pôle in New York soon. We all those guys I named are the people who pushed Daniel do a Pollet because we did a small party in the year, I can't remember when, it was so long ago,
Right.
and it was so much fun to do that together, and I think this has changed the vision of Burgundy, because at my father's generation, everybody was fighting with each other because it was hard to sell wine, and so. My father was saying bad things about his neighbors, and these neighbors were saying bad things about him.
And that's such a, it's right. It's so great that your generation played out where everyone, worked together and trusted each other. I'm curious, since then and until now, and Guillaume, you could jump in anytime too, because you were certainly around. Tell me about some of your observations of Burgundy since then. Like you sort of alluded that your father's generation, they really didn't collaborate. Yours, did, and that helped, build Burgundy and the wines. Has that continued? I could throw out a whole list of topics like climate change. The accessibility of these wines are hard. The pricing has gone up. But even with that, there's new producers and, new regions of which, you even have a winery in the Macon, which dresses that. Tell me about things that stand out, the most to you coming up to today.
Things have changed, I would say, after the year 2000 or so, when actually, for example, for the white wines, they became interesting, and the US market has been the first to buy the white wines. What you have to understand is that when the wineries start to make money, they can reinvest in quality also. Right. So that it helps a lot to make better wines, because then you can have better equipment, you can take much more care of the vineyards, hire more people, and do things like this. And of course, it's the new generations are still under that past, and they communicate. I'm close to a lot of those new guys, young guys. I taste with them. They come and taste at the domain. I taste their wines.
Well, Dominique, I think they're in reverence of you, so it's a great opportunity for them. But I also think you recognize looking at them as important to you, the wines in the region, correct?
I would say that we all respect each other, because when you see it from the inside, our job is not that easy. And so, when the guy makes very good wines, you have to be full of respect for it, because it's not only a chance or not only talent, it's a lot of work.
Right.
So there's respect, because we know what we have to do. We know the trouble we might have. Well, you mentioned global warming. We've had frost, we've had things like this. So it's respect. I'm not sure if they think I'm the best guy on the planet, because they also think they are really good. And for sure, some of them are really talented too. And the proposition for Burgundy wines has never been as good as now.
I agree.
There's just a little bit of craziness, and some of those young guys who maybe it's the issue, they never suffered that much, and some pricing are going a bit crazy. I think it will stabilize over the next few years.
I hope.
Because the market will change, I guess. But Burgundy, I think Burgundy is strong. Is strong with all the people that are running those domains. There's more and more. There's more and more domains that show their quality. That the domain which is taken over from a father who had no instruction, who was forced to do the job, and now the kids they're like Guillaume. They haven't been forced to do it, so they get into that because they love it, and when they love it, they get really good.
Guillaume, when you look around, now that you're, at the winery and in the business, I mean, are you seeing a lot of this generational change?
Yeah, something I've noticed in this little universe of at least Côte de Beaune winemakers, I'm going to say,
Right.
When I was working on computers, the other people that were in the same field as us were competitors, and we would either spy them or crush them, which I guess is fine. That's what you do with
but
like
different
competitors.
Environment.
Yeah. That when I arrived in Burgundy, I realized that every time I talk with people who make wine, no one says anything like says bad things about other producer. There's a lot of like people like are really keen to share and learn from you. Learn in French is an interesting word because it goes both ways, and I think it applies really well there. And yeah, like I noticed at least my dad's generation. I noticed that there's this envy to share and like almost no privacy and about what's going on inside the winery or in the vineyards. It's also
but
like the vineyards
okay
are
with
so.
that.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that I can like I have my friends from my generation. For example, I'm very friends since I'm a kid with Robin Rappet in Pernon-Vergelès. And when I have he's a little more experienced than I am, so I'm never hesitating in calling him to ask what's going on with your wines. Like mine are a little like that. I would like to have your view, and hopefully maybe someday it call me for advices. I don't know, but I love that about this universe. I don't know if it's like that all over the world, but in at least in Burgundy, I feel that.
It is and it isn't, obviously, and it's nice to see that you feel that way and continue your father's feelings and share. Dominique and Guillaume, we have to take a quick break. We're talking to Dominique and Guillaume Lafon from Dominique Lafon Winery in Beaune. Guys, when we come back, I want to talk about the winery and what you're doing and really get into a few things. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Okay, we're back. We're back with my guests, father and son, Dominique Lafon and Guillaume Lafon from Domaine Lafon in Beaune. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about what the two of you are doing at Dominique Lafon right now. The winery is located in and around Beaune. Dom, you founded the winery, I think, somewhere around 2008, if I'm correct. The question is, why start a new winery?
Perfect. Well, I started that winery because I have been working all my life for my family at Domaine des Comtes Lafon. At my generation, there's 7 owners. It's the same at Héritier Comtes Lafon. And I thought it was time for me to have my own small business. The goal was not to do something big, but to have something with independent.
Right.
And that's how I started with very little vineyard. There was 1.5 hectare or so, and then I added a bit more over the time. But I've been running Dominique Lafon in 2008 and until recently, until 2-ish years ago, while running Héritier Comtes Lafon, while running Comtes Lafon, while consulting in Oregon. So that production, it was super quiet. And no visibility. I had no time to talk about it, no time to do tastings, no time to have more clients. I had 3 clients when I started. One in England, one in US, and one in France, and that's it.
Did that bother you? Like in the back of your mind, you were a little upset that you couldn't concentrate on this, or you took that in stride?
No, it was okay. It was okay. I was super happy and busy working at Comte Lafon and Héritier Comte Lafon, and it was fine. It was fine that it could stay like this, and well, for the moment where I was there, when I retired from Comte Lafon, I said, now let's move forward. And when I retired from Comte Lafon, 6 months after that, that's when Guillaume said, I want to join you. So I said, okay, let's push hard now. Let's move.
All right. So wait, can I just go back with a question? So you retired from Comte Lafon, so you're out of there?
Yeah.
Day to day? I mean, or do you do anything?
Well, now, at Comte Lafon, Pierre and Léa, they've been hired at Comte Lafon 5 years ago.
Okay.
So they worked with me for 3 years.
So it's in good hands.
It's in good hands, and now I just do check the vineyards with them, and taste the wine with them. So it's an appointment a week to go through the cellar, to go see the vineyards, but everything else, all the business, the employees, everything else, they run it and they do it perfectly well. Right. And they do also the technical part. They do it very well now also. But I think we are at the stage at Comte Lafon where they like they like reinsurance. Like, when I come and say, that wine tastes good. Or, yes, it's the good decision. Yes, it's the good decision.
I would hope they use you every way they can. Tell me why, because obviously what you just told me, your life really now is in Beaune. Why was Beaune so attractive to you as a winemaker? That's why you're there now and doing this.
Well, I live in Beaune, and I've lived in Beaune most of my life. Because it's a small city, there's restaurants, there's theaters, there's activity, and I didn't feel like living in the country. The issue, simple, super simple. You live in Meursault. If you want to go to a restaurant, you have to go to Beaune, and then you avoid drinking because you have to drive back to Meursault. I hate that. I can walk to the restaurants in Beaune. And so,
but Dominique, that's lifestyle. I get that, and I realize how important. What about Beaune as a winemaking place?
My wines are not made exactly in Beaune. They are made in Bligny-les-Beaunes. It's another story. I took over with friends the Château de Bligny-les-Beaunes, which is a huge cellar. And we've set the first custom crush in Burgundy, actually.
Right.
So where we make the wine with Guillaume, it's I own a third of it because there's 2 other partners. And we share equipment, we share employees, and this is our environment at the moment. Because when you do 4 hectares, it's like 30,000 bottles. When you do 30,000 bottles of wine, it's kind of hard to have a full grade equipment. But if you share the space, you can buy huge grade equipment. I couldn't hire an employee. We have 2 employees, which we can use whenever we need. So it's very convenient for the size we are. It's very, very convenient.
Is there a situation like that anywhere else in Burgundy?
I think we're the only one.
Yeah, it sounds like
there's something similar in Chassagne now. There's a kind of a custom crush situation as well in Chassagne that's been building as well.
But so they don't share employees, Guillaume.
No, they don't.
The idea of sharing employees and equipment, I think it's, I was inspired by what they do in Oregon. There's a lot of custom crush facilities in Oregon. Eric Amaker is a friend of mine, and I visited, his place quite often, and that's when we had the chance to put our hands on the Chateau de Bligny. I said, well, we have so much space. This is what we have to do.
Right. You see in Oregon that it could work. Guillaume, I mean, I think one of the nice things is that you bring a fresh perspective to the winery. You know, the Lafon name has some decent history. This is a relatively new winery. You know, what are some of the experimentations or innovations that you are doing, that you want to do? You know, are you able to do them? It sounds like that you could be more nimble, you know, at this winery. And Dom, it sounds like, you know, you've implied that too. You know, so what are you doing? I mean, the setup alone is somewhat innovative. We just said that, you know, there's really nobody else doing it. So, you know, what are you up to there?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that I think my dad has always been, although he's 66 now, he's always been very modern in his approach and challenging himself with trying new stuff. So let's not get into the old guy is the tradition and the new guy brings the fresh.
No, I didn't say
stuff.
that.
No, I'm
but
kidding.
I'm glad I'm glad you recognize, you know, that Dom isn't this old fart. You know, he looks forward.
And also there's something where I coming from the startup environment where everything needs to change super fast. They always say, you know, we're building the plane while we fly, which is scaring me a lot.
Right.
I think a lot of things take time and need to be experimented, thought about, and also adapted to the vintage and the appellation. When I did my BTS Vitiono in La Vitie Beaune, there was a lot of students coming from very new, most of the times new wave winemakers or new wave wine sellers that have so many ideas about winemaking and about also the vineyards that I never heard about. I wrote everything down and documented myself. There's a lot of interesting things, but also a lot of trends. And I think trends, let's be careful to not just follow the trend. And I think when you're in a good setting, business-wise and in the wine-wise, and if you make good stuff, you can pay yourself the luxury to not follow trends. Then about the stuff I wanted to work on, I did experimentation during my scholars on the volume of barrels. Luckily, Dominique already had tried on the Burgundy white we made, Bourgogne Blanc, the demi-muit, so which is a 500 hectoliters minimum content barrel. And I did experiment which confirmed what we were wanting to confirm. So a very conclusive experiment, and we want to keep doing that and adding more and more of those big barrel contents on the smallest appellation, at least, where less wood is needed and keeps that freshness. I think vineyard wise, there's a lot of stuff that I've learned from my agronomy courses that seem interesting. For now, I'm still a little bit following the recipe. Right. I'd like to try stuff with at least higher vineyards, higher growing vineyards. Which is a mix of a mix of very different advantages regarding climate change and icing, and but also comfort of work for people, and machine the adaptability to the machine you can use. My dream is to have to eventually make all the vineyards work without a tractor. Using different kind of systems, such as the horse potentially, which we already use in the Puligny Shanguin, the drones, which I think has very, very interesting promises. It's still developing, but I think for me there's a future in the drone for the product. And chenillard, so like a little I don't know how to call that in English, I'm sorry, but a very little very, very little tractor. That's
caterpillar, small,
caterpillar,
like caterpillar.
Like a caterpillar.
They're starting to make electric ones now. They're using them in California.
Then I think so. We also have the chance to buy for a few years now a very, very nice slope aligoté, which I think is a fun material to work on at the same time for the fermentation process, but also for the aging process, working with the lees or not as much. Working also eventually with a different kind of continents. For now, we're doing exclusively in tank, and it's purposely done like that. I think it would be interesting to try other content in this for those aligoté.
So, can I ask you something? You mentioned an eye towards vineyards with higher elevations.
Yes.
I have some understanding of location and height and all of that. Do you favor the higher elevations because they will produce the grapes that will make the wines that you're trying to make? Whether that's tension, minerality, things like that. Do the higher elevations, give you that opportunity?
Yes, for me.
Hold on. May I get in? Because you're mentioning high elevation, which is a situation when I think Guillaume was talking about higher trellising.
Okay.
Maybe Guillaume, you should be clear about that.
No, they're both important points on the trellising. But does higher elevation offer you, separate of the trellising, wines that you want to make?
They're both related. For me, they're both related also to the climate change, of course, and how we adapt to it. So, like terroirs that were so cold and so long to mature in the past can make today super great Chardonnays, and before there was maybe only aligoté on it because it's stronger. So I think if you think of terroir, yes, there is some interesting things in higher elevations. But I was talking more about the trellising of the vineyard, which
the height of the
exactly,
plant,
which brings many advantages. But it's something I would like to experiment on, also make my own opinion on. But it brings many advantages, and also like the producing the wine with the balance of maturity that you want between the phenologic maturity and the aroma maturity. But
right,
and it's also
Dominic,
great for when working in the vineyards. So it makes it easier.
Well, to that point, Dominic, you've said in the past that the most stressful part of making wine is the farming. Is that still the case for you? Is that where the most worry is? Is that where the most importance is?
Well, it is, and it is more and more with global warming. Now every year in April we fear the frost, which was almost never happening when I started.
You've had a few run-ins with hail.
Hail. Now it's getting better because we shoot in the clouds, and it does rain instead of hail. So it's been the last bad hail we've had was in 2014.
Right.
And ever since, I haven't seen hail, or very, very, very little. But the frost impact is very strong. You're in 2021. It's 20% of a normal crop, and 20% of a normal crop. You lose money because it's working the vineyards in Burgundy with a high density. It's a lot of work. It has a big cost, and when you're at this point, you lose money. So it is stressful because even if it's not because you want to be super rich, but when your company loses money and on a vintage, and you have to expect next vintage to be a good one to make it, but the April next year, the frost might still happen, and you feel like, wow, if it happens 2 times, I'm dead.
Yeah. I could see why. I mean, who should endure that?
Yeah.
That you answered the stress question with that,
Well, and then the seasons, sometimes we have heat waves. We might have, there's more. It's the weather is more hectic than it used to be. So we could have heavy rains or no rain at all. So there's a lot of changes in and we have to adapt to it.
Well, can I ask?
This is what Guillaume was talking about.
Well, I want to ask you. I want to ask you about that. But getting specific about farming organically and biodynamically, which Guillaume, I mean, you're moving away from tractors to horses. I mean, you're really making a commitment. When you farm this way, thoughtfully, organically, biodynamically, 2 questions. Does it help to express the terroir in the best way? And does it also help you with climate change? And I know elevation by growing higher may help with that a little, but farming this way, you just make better wines, right?
Well, it does help. I think it does help. It's complicated to find out what's going on when you use organic and biodynamic. When Anne-Claude did those experimentation in 1994, she made separate cuvées with splitting the vineyard in 2. One was organic, and the other one was organic and biodynamic. And we run blind tasting, and I was there with her to do those blind tasting. And I would say, and it was just like she just started, and one word which came out 70% of the time, we guessed which was the biodynamic wine, and we talked about energy.
Right.
More
75% is pretty good, and energy is the adjective for sure.
Yeah. Then biodynamic, there's one of the preparation we use it's the 500, which is manure you bury in a home, but that 500 does a lot for the soil and has a lot to do with how the soil will deal with water. The soil will retain more water, and so it's nowadays with sometimes we have drought. I think our soils, they drain better when there's heavy rain because they swallow the water, and they retain the water better.
Very important.
So for the future, it's very important. I don't think it's going to be enough. I'm really thinking that the way we plow the vineyards now is from the old time. We have to find out a solution because most of what we are going to have to do is to keep as much water as possible in the soil for the summer season.
Right.
And we have to. That's going to be Guillaume's job to think about it. But to me, it's a main important thing to do.
Well, Guillaume, it sounds like you're definitely, thinking and moving in that direction. I want to move into the cellar a little. I talk to a lot of people and, over and over, and not just recently, everyone agrees that, really the important work is in the farm, on the vineyard. But of course, it makes life easier when the fruit is grown properly biodynamically. As I mentioned earlier, without getting too nerdy about batonnage, barrels, and other stuff, tell me a little about the winemaking. I know Dominic and Guillaume, people talk about whole cluster destemming. Dominique, you've done both. What are you doing at Domaine Lafon?
Okay. First of all, I would say everything we're going to talk about from now, it's cellar work. That is what defines a style.
Right.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's important to understand. I think what is important in a cellar is precision. And then you pick your style.
How do you relate it to wine and what precision is in the cellar? I mean, what is the actual, act of precision in the cellar?
Well, you've got to be clean.
Okay.
You have to get in clean grapes, do the sorting. You have to be on top of everything. Like when the reds ferment, be super precise with your temperatures. Control your temperatures, because if it goes too warm, you might get stop fermentation. You might get VA. You might I try to avoid everything, which it's just being precise, knowing where you are. But we do a fair amount of analysis at Dominique Lafon, but with Guillaume, we taste the wine the new wines at least twice a month.
Okay.
And we assess the wine, because I think one of the greatest quality in a wine is purity. Because if you have purity, you are in your terroir. You express your terroir. When there's too much winemaking or too much fault, you lose the terroir.
So terroir, so by doing less, I guess, being precise, and the term, low intervention, not intervening as much, can get you to the purity you're looking for?
It depends on what kind of low intervention you mentioned.
Right. I knew that was kind of a dumb question. I mean, it could boil down to like shorter élevage, right?
No, but you have to be discreet in what you do. Like you talked about batonnage. It's been very much in fashion to do batonnage for a long time. And I remember one day I had a young Japanese woman who came in the cellar at Comte Lafon. She was, I love your wine. I know, Dominique, you do batonnage. I was like, yes. And she was very excited. And I said, what about if I tell you I do batonnage once a week? It's good. And she was like, and if I do it twice a week, is it better?
Right.
And like once a day, is it even more better? It has no sense. It's like all the stories with new barrels. We use new barrels, but the goal is that you don't feel the new barrel. If we use batonnage, you shouldn't feel the batonnage. If we use heavy lees, you shouldn't feel the lees. You should feel the profile of the wine which comes from the vineyard. And so this is what you have to have in mind when you make wine. But doing nothing gets you to using no sulfur, to go on vacation, to come back in summer for bottling, and you have
Brettanomyces. I didn't mean that low of an intervention. I meant some intervention.
So you get to follow what's going on in the wine, and then maybe it's time to mention something with Guillaume, because I think he's very aware. I think the way how we're going to work together in the future is...
That was my next question. I want to know the dynamics of how you work together. Right. Go ahead.
Okay.
And let Guillaume talk too, Dominique.
Yeah, he will. And I've done that at Comte Lafon also. I think first they have to learn exactly how I make the wine, and they have to understand exactly how I make it. Once they'll get to know exactly how I make it and get used to it and feel comfortable about it, there will be a time, which happened to me also when I was younger, when I will feel, well, I'm just copying what my father is doing, and it's super boring, and the wines are not at the same level. And what I want them to be is I want them to make wine they like, and I want them to make wine which reflects their personality. So it's the second step, or the where I want them to go, because there's no better wine. You cannot make better wine than if when you are really into it and you express yourself through the wines. The wine I make now, it's wine I love. It's exactly what I like to drink. And maybe Guillaume has another idea, and it's fine.
You give Guillaume the base. You take your whole body of experience and share it with him, but you have the presence of mind that as he grows, to let him take all that information and find his own way, which
exactly.
I think, is that in fact really happening, Guillaume?
No, that is happening. I'm also into this learn the rules before you break the rules mindset.
Right. Good point.
Although the learning might be long, but yeah, that's how I see it as well.
Right. And do you feel like you're still in the learning stage?
Yes, I am. Maybe
I know you'll always be learning, but there's still a lot to take in, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, not to scare my dad, because that's not, but like, I feel like before 10 years of practice, you don't I feel like a lot of the learning is also about understanding vintage and comparing vintage. Once you know very well your terroir, it's about that. It's about time, and to have to be able to project yourself when you taste a wine that's maybe, like, let's say, just finished its fermentation, and for example that would be very reduced, and like to know if this reduction, for example, is interesting or not when it's going to be bottled and aging. You need so much time, and this is what I personally now don't have. So I'm saying 10 years because I've heard that before, and also because, and I think that's what everyone who does crafts, handcraft stuff say, but also because I think to have like vintage maybe that could look like the eventuality of vintage that are really, really different and express themselves very differently. You need to have those different experience of vintage and following the wine every week during the process, the whole process, like from picking to bottling, and comparing different vintages is a big part of the learning.
You have so many vineyards and different vineyards. So as you said, you have to deal with the vineyards, the terroir, the vintage and climate can vary every year, what you do in the cellar. I mean, you guys have your hands full. I want to talk to you about, the wines. Let's get specific. I mean, we're in the end, I think the most interesting part of the story is getting to the bottle, but I always, want to talk about the bottle. You guys make over a dozen, red and white wines, at Dominique, Lafon, and Bone from all your vineyards. I guess, Dom, I want to ask you first, and Guillaume, this, will come to you too. And I'm not sure you want this question to be asked to you, but did you want to distinguish your Meursaults at Dominique Lafon from the other wineries? Is that strictly because of the vineyards, or does that become style? What happens there?
Okay, what happened? Well, first of all, it's a different spot of vineyards, so it's slightly different. Second, it's a different place, and the place has an importance. Environment, temperature of the cellars, the yeast around you are not the same. So you start from the start. You're going to get something different, and then I felt that Dominique Lafon could be more experimental, because when you run Comte Lafon, people are expecting something.
Right.
So when you change something at Comte Lafon, you have to be super sure. You have to try it for a long time, make sure it doesn't hurt your clients and say, it doesn't look like what it was before. So you do very slow motion changes. You have to be very careful. Already, Héritier Comte Lafon in Macon was more fun, because I could go faster in the changes. And at Dominique Lafon, when I started, nobody knew it. So I said, okay, let's take more freedom. And actually, this is what I did because there's not as much pressure.
Right.
Comte Lafon is a lot of pressure.
Right. So you're in a place, which is, I guess, a little more enjoyable, a little more nimble. Let's talk
it's more
about
relaxed.
More relaxed.
It's more relaxed.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you're making a lot of nice red wines. You're making, and Guillaume, talk to me about this. You're making a handful of Premier Cru red wines, from different vineyard designate sites, like Greves and all those. Tell me about some of those wines.
I would like Guillaume. Guillaume is very good at talking about the wines.
Yeah, Guillaume, tell me.
So Guillaume will speak about the wines.
Yeah. So
wait, before you start, do you have it? And this is like, who's your favorite child? Do you have a preference or an enjoyability factor to making reds over whites, whites over red? I mean, does that play into it at all?
I absolutely need to work both and drink both. It is very important for me. And honestly, I love both. They're very different in the making, very different in the world would be so sad if I would make only white and only reds or only reds. So for me, it's important. Yeah, the Comte Lafon are very famous for their Meursault Premier Cru and their Volnay Premier Cru as well.
Right.
So when you work Bourgogne Blanc or Bonnet Pinot, you don't work it the same way. So you don't necessarily would use all the Comte Lafon techniques and process. But yeah, we're making or in reds we have Bonnet Pinot, which is at the border of between Beaune and Pommard, not too far from the.
Is Epinette the vineyard or the location, or?
Yes, it's the appellation. It's a Premier Cru. It's actually you write it the same as the Clos des Epnots, which is famous and which is very very close to it.
Right.
We make Volnay Village, which are most of the winery is located in Volnay-Luret, which is just under the Cailleret down the road. And in this parcel, we also have Volnay-Luret Premier Cru, which is our Premier Cru in Volnay. That's it for the reds. We have two super interesting parcels of Bourgogne Blanc, which we assemble. One of them is in South Meursault under the Limousin. And 2/3 of the Bourgogne Blanc is actually in Puligny. It's called Les Femelottes. And that's for the Bourgogne Blanc that we assemble at the end. We have the Meursault Narvaux that we mentioned earlier.
Guillaume, on the Bourguignon Blanc, give me the range of age of some of the vines.
I think in Meursault, they're about 40, 50 years old.
70.
70? Wow. Wait, awesome. I'm 70 years old in Meursault, and the younger in Puligny.
30 years old in Puligny.
30, yeah. I confuse them both, yeah. They're about 17 Meursault.
All right, so continue on the whites. Go ahead.
And yeah, we have the Meursault Narvaux, the Puligny Changuin, which we are currently replanting a big part of it, half of it. We also buy grapes. So we buy Pernan Vergelès, we buy Corton Charlemagne, we buy the Aligoté we mentioned earlier as well. In 2003, we had 2023. We also had a Savigny Blanc, and this year in 2024, we have a super nice monthly Premier Cru that's close to Sous-la-Velle. It's in closer to Clos des Chênes. It's where Volnay and Montlhy gather on the hill.
Right. Do properties become available in the region, and if and when they do, are you still in the mindset of if they're good vineyards, you'll continue to acquire?
So it happens a lot. Most of the time, the deal that we hear about, would be like a complete, big, familiar domain with estate that would be bought by someone that's super rich, either a French actor or someone in China. So the stories you've heard about. I need to get more closer to the deals and also learn how to negotiate those kind of deals. But I am willing. So I'm willing to buy new vineyards if that's an occasion I have. But something I'm clear about, I think, in my head is that I don't want to get, like, I'm not gonna get vineyards that are too far away. Like, I want to have both for working, both for working and for the identification. I think I need to be precise. Like, the Côte de Beaune is already so diverse. There's on this little Zoom, there's already so many things, different wines you can do. And I think it's good to have the focus on the appellation and terroir you work on. So in this area, I would be very happy to invest. And second of all, it's different times than the 80s regarding market, business, and the challenges we have. And also, I'm from a different generation, and maybe I want to have a life. I don't want to build an empire. And I want to
the quality of what you do is important.
I want the quality is first, and I want to keep doing some things that's very human scaled. I like the idea of being very autonomous, being able to do most of the things myself, and for that, like, I want to be able to have time to go in working in the vineyards, to go working in the winery. And for that, I need to stay at a scale that is not like too big.
You have a vision of how you want to work, operate, and the wines you want to make. I know we talked about a lot of wines. At the end of the show, we'll direct people where they can go to get more info, and there's certainly enough, info about the particular wines and background. Before we end the show, I want to do something I mentioned to you earlier, and that's a thing called the wine list. Every show we've done on the Grape Nation, we've done the wine list with our guests, and we've asked almost 300 guests these same 5 questions. So I'm going to ask you the question. Dominique, you can go first, and then Guillaume, you can answer it. I want to get your take on your feelings about wines. I post these on our social media. I think when people want to learn about wine or they're engaged with your wines and they hear about your story, they also love to hear, what some of your thoughts and preferences are. And that's why we do the wine list. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? And the reference or context is, what's in your fridge? What are you trying? Everything doesn't have to be for work. Do you have a favorite outside of the area? Dominique, what kind of wines are you drinking presently?
Okay, in my fridge for tonight, I have André Kistler Grand Cru Riesling from Alsace. That will be for tonight.
Alsatian Riesling, good.
Yeah, I'm very keen on outside the great Chardonnays, of course, and Meursault and Puligny. I'm very keen on Alsace and German Rieslings.
Okay.
So I collect it, and I really enjoy drinking Riesling.
Is this something you've been doing a long time, drinking and collecting Rieslings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I studied with André Ostertag. He was with me in the same school, and we've been friends forever. And he opened my mind on Alsace. I actually worked at Faller when I was very young, for 6 months, and I'm passionate about Riesling, Honestly, it's my second grape after Chardonnay. I'm passionate about Riesling.
I am right up there with you, and you know that sommeliers love Riesling. Guillaume, what are you drinking now? You're in Paris. You're not at the winery. You love to, try and taste wines with friends. Tell me what
Yes,
you're
of
doing.
course. So now the only bottle that's in that room with me, it's a wine I especially like. It's a 2023 Domaine de l'Oratoire, which is a raisin domaine. A friend of mine who worked at La Grange des Pères, made of...
Guillaume, can you spell for me Domaine?
De l'Oratoire. O-R-A-T-O-I-R-E.
Okay.
It's a new producer that planted everything himself. Really new generation, but like the expression of the terroir is very unique.
They?
I love this those wine. They're in Languedoc. They're actually like the domain is very close to the domaine de la Grange des Pères. By the it's a super nice terroir expression. They use Cinsault, Mourvèdre, and sometimes some weird Italian grapes that no one's heard about, and it's not funky at all. It's very for me it's the work of someone who's been drinking and like a lot of wines and who knows what he's doing. I also love German Rieslings, of course.
Okay.
And as for wines, I can like for something chilled but that can get you far, I always like to have some Muscadet.
Yes, I am a big fan of Muscadet. Great wine, great value. All right, second question, Dominique. Favorite wine and food pairing? It's sort of the silliest question of the batch, but I'm asking you what yours is, not what we think is great, roast chicken and Pinot Noir, whatever. And it's probably something you don't eat that often, but what's that? This is great wine, and it pairs so well with this food.
Yeah. First of all, I would say it depends on the season. Because
fair enough.
If it's spring and summertime, I will go with Riesling and maybe a ceviche or something like this would be great.
Good one.
Ceviche or a tartare of fish would be beautiful. But I think my favorite food and pairing, it's got quite an expensive one. It's langoustine and Meursault Perrier.
Okay, that's...
You could switch Meursault Perrier with a great Puligny Premier Cru, which has a little bit of age. Like, you would open a 17 now, which still has freshness. You don't want to have a too old wine, but you don't want to have a super young wine. It's got to be mature and fresh. 17, 18, 15 at the maximum. And langoustine.
I think that's perfect. That's a classy one. And it's accessible. It's a little different. What about you, Guillaume?
Honestly, a great Côte de Nuit Pinot Noir or a Bonnet Pinot or a Volnay-Luret is good as well. With a roasted chicken. Simple.
As I said. Yep.
Yes.
That's the classic.
And honestly, like, because that's something I like as well, like a Savagnin or a Vin Jaune with Comté apples. Like classic one that I love.
Nice. All right, third question. I ask you this question because you're in Beaune, and early on, Dominique, you said Beaune, has better restaurants than most of the regions. You guys travel a little. I want you to tell me about a favorite restaurant and our wine bar at home in your travels, and I ask because I'm just looking for fun recommendations. I'm looking for places that have a great wine list. The people are terrific. The place is nice. The vibe is good. You could just walk in and feel comfortable. And I'm not asking for you to rank number 1, 2, 3 or your favorites. Just give me a couple of places that are good examples of, great wine and the experience. Dominique, can you think of anything? Anywhere.
Next to Beaune, not far, in Tournu, a restaurant called Les Terrasses is amazing.
Yes,
he's got a great wine list, and he's in Tournu, so he has a great selection of Macon wines also. It's very interesting. Cave Madeleine in Beaune, which is a very simple place, but the chef is very talented.
Dominique, can you spell that for me?
Cave, caves,
right?
And Madeleine, like the name Madeleine, M-A-D-E-L.
Okay. Got it.
Then there's a restaurant which is a bit more, a bit better, which is called L'Expression in Beaune, where you can have fabulous breast chicken. The wine list is very good. And then there's to me in Beaune, the classic is my friend. He's been there forever. It's Ma Cuisine run by Pierre Escoffier, because I think it's the most amazing wine list in Beaune. That would be about it.
Those are good ones. Say no more. Guillaume, maybe you could throw in something from Paris?
Yeah, because that's covered everything there is in Beaune. No, I'm kidding.
Right. But you don't disagree either.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. And big fan of the Terrasse in Tournu. I was there last week. It was amazing. Okay, so in Paris, I think one of the most mind-blowing dinner I've ever had, and also I didn't pay for it, which makes it more because it's a place, it's a fancy place. It's Table by Bruno Verjus, where for me it's like a kitchen that's very, very creative, that pushes the limits, but still gets super comfy and tasteful. You're not eating a piece of wood, like it's real products. They're here, they're almost alive in your plate. And for me, it was mind blowing. Let's move out from France, and Raj Par, the sommelier, when we were in New York last time, brought me to the Four Horsemen, which is a super cool wine bar in New York. It's very famous, so I don't need to do the advertising, but I had a super cool experience there. The wine list is amazing.
That comes up on this show a lot.
Yeah, the sommelier was really great as well. I liked it.
Well, we lost a friend at Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
Justin.
Yeah, it's sad.
Go ahead. Paris?
Ventre, V-A-N-T-R-E.
Marco Pelletier.
Yeah, it's also a very nice place. I like to go. Yeah.
I like it too.
Yes. It's a very interesting place. And I'm glad you both agree, because that's the type of place and recommendation I'm looking for. All right, those are all good. Fourth question. Here's the question. Favorite all-time wine? When I initially structured the question and asked it, I wanted to find out, Dominique, what the most expensive and rare wine you ever tasted. I've moved away from that because Aldo Sohm looked at me and said, that's the dumbest question. Here's what you want to know. He said to me, you want to know the wine that influenced you, that was a gateway or changed the way you thought about it or made such an impression. Is there a wine or two out there in your lifetime through your travels, Dominique, that's that important wine, that stands out?
Yeah. It's going to be hard because I've had a long life around the wine.
I know. That's why I said one or two. But
okay, there's one that comes in mind because it's also very emotional when I have the chance to drink it. I've had a bottle maybe 5 years ago. It's Clos des 60 Ouvrais, Volnay-Cailleret, Clos des 60 Ouvrais, 1966 from Gérard Potel, from Domaine de la Pousse d'Or, which it's because I love Gérard. He's been influential, and this wine is just magnificent. is amazing. And the last bottle I had 5 years ago was still so fresh and beautiful and built on elegance, and it was amazing.
So 5 years ago, you had the 1960, you're saying?
66.
66, and it was as good as ever.
Oh, it was amazing. But then I would like to name, I've had a few great bottles of Frédéric Munier, Musigny, and Musigny is my favorite terroir.
Why?
Elegance.
Okay, that's the
elegance.
First word.
It's got intensity, and it's very light on its feet. I remember the 2001, because it's the kind of thing you can drink quite old. And last, because he's my brother-in-law, I've had at least 4 times or 5 times 1945 Amoureuse from Roumier with Christophe Roumier. I guess Guillaume has had the wine once at least. So
45 was a great year, right?
Yes, a short crop. But so it's 3 wines. Sorry, but those
those are all perfect.
And they're all Pinot Noir, because I haven't talked about reds, but when I drink red, 95% is Pinot Noir, and I would say 80 to 90% is Pinot Noir from Burgundy.
What, just for kicks, the 5%? That's not Pinot Noir.
Well,
that?
It's going to be I think we are doing very interesting and beautiful wines in Oregon, and I love it too. I like to drink it.
Dom, we could do a whole show on Oregon.
Yeah. Other than that, I drink Northern Rhone. I like good Syrahs, and
I agree.
I wouldn't escape if you bring me I don't know, say 1985 Chateau Latour or Margaux.
Okay, so you'll force yourself to have a Bordeaux. Yes. All right, Guillaume, tell me about, you have a shorter life so far than your dad. Tell me about some of the wines, a wine or two, that really sort of influenced the way you think about it, changed the way you think about it. Can you think of something?
Yeah, we shouldn't have let my dad talk first, because he covers it all, and then I have nothing to say.
Well, I'm not sure. Well, he said you had the 45 Roumier, but I'm looking for a different perspective from you.
Yeah. No. So it's not gonna be original, but I think, for sure, my most mind-blowing experience with a wine was with the Musigny 89 from Domaine Roumier as well. I always remember this one in particular. It was for my sister's wedding. It was during COVID, so it was 14 person maximum in the room, and a lot of the people here were not necessarily so much into the wine, and I got to have 2 glasses of it, and for me, it made me so emotional. I don't know. Wine was
that's an example really of an incredible wine, but also an incredible wine in a terrific atmosphere, celebrating your sister's wedding. I mean, just everything, seems to click on that. It makes it even more memorable. Yeah. As I mentioned, I post these answers. Here's the last question, and I'm going to read you the question as it is, but I'm going to change it. The question is, recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks, American dollars. Recommend a red or a white. You could do a region, a maker, or whatever. Here's what I want to get from you guys, okay? Because we didn't talk about it a lot. I want you to recommend to me a red and a white wine, each of you, that represents what you think the best value to quality. And I go back to value because at price, I don't want you to do go too crazy. I want you to keep it on the lower end as possible. So Dominique, if you had to recommend best value wines in Burgundy, a red and a white, what would you say? And you don't even have to, you could say Marzenay and not a maker, or,
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, if it comes from Burgundy, you get to dig in the Mâconnais.
Okay.
There's
so the Mâconnais offers great value.
Great value, and they are beautiful wines. There's also a new generation in that area.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of very good and interesting producers now in the Mâconnais, and they're terrific values.
Great.
Because they're not as much in fashion, so nobody takes big margin on it, and the external price is very, very decent.
Okay. Now, is Mâconnais making both red and whites?
There's not much red made in
right. It's mostly white. So where would you go on? Where would you go on a red recommendation? Same vein.
I'm very proud of it, but I think the Avni Pinot Noir from Lingua Franca is super QPR. That's how you say that.
Right.
It's a lovely Pinot Noir. It's always elegant, very drinkable, balanced, and very typical of beautiful Oregon wines.
That's
the entry. That's the entry level.
Right. So that's their best value.
It's available and great value.
All right, good one. Guillaume, what comes to mind? White and a red, best value. Keep it in Burgundy.
Oh, in Burgundy.
I let Dominique go out of the region, but I want you to try hard to give me a good value red, good value white in Burgundy.
Honestly, I'm like a super, super good value white in Burgundy because there's not so many. Is Bourgogne Blanc we make, I think, at Dominique Lafon, which is always like amazing. I think people are always amazed that with the super nice parcels we have, how it gets at the same time close to Meursault and Puligny. As for, I would definitely recommend Marange Red for like a go-to wine that you can have every day. I could go with the Marange Red, and also which is wine from the future, because the fact that the years are most of the times warmer make them great, and you can even age them now that they're super nice stuff there.
I agree with you on that, and that's exactly what I was looking for, because plenty of people know they exist. That many more don't know they exist, so we want to get people out there to experiment. All right, gentlemen, I've kept you for way too long, and longer than you imagined I would, and I appreciate that. I want to do a quick wrap-up of the show, get a little info from you, and we'll be on our way. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, excuse me, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Listen to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. If you like the show, please subscribe to the Grape Nation and leave a review. You can follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby. You can follow us on X @BenRuby without the S, but you can always find us with the hashtag The Grape Nation. We are on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, I will post Dominique and Guillaume's wine list selections. There's a lot of good stuff in there, so pay attention, on our social media sites in the next coming week. Dominique and Guillaume, if we want to get more information on Dominique Lafon wines, where's the best place to go?
It's a tricky one.
I know. That's why it's not just like a website and you can buy or
There's no website. I think the only thing you're going to email Guillaume, and he's very good at that. He will send you a beautiful answer.
Okay.
Anything you want to know.
Okay. What about Guillaume? Maybe you could jump in on this first. Is there any way to follow you guys on social media?
No. Okay. I'm working on it. I promised too long
for
ago.
For the winery or personally?
Both. I don't have any social media accounts that working, but I want to make one for the domain. My dad is actually kind of an influencer on Instagram. You can follow him, and I'll keep you updated. I keep you updated for the professional Dominique Lafon.
What's Dominic? What are you, Lafon Dom?
Lafon.Dom.
.Dom. Okay. All right. Yeah. So you could sort of get a sense of that. Guillaume, I will refrain from yelling at you during the podcast for not being where you should be in social media, and trust that when we're done, that you will diligently work towards that for a lot of obvious reasons. Most importantly and selfishly, people want to know more about, what you're doing. So, and that I mean sincerely.
All right, we'll be in touch on that. Desire.
Yes. All right. I want to thank our guests, Dominique and Guillaume Lafon from Dominique Lafon Winery. Thank you to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.